9/11 happened in 2001, and we invaded Afghanistan shortly thereafter. The Boston Globe released their report that exposed the sex abuse scandal in the church in January of 2002. Like, it just seems a little bit coincidental that that happened right around the launch of this war. It almost seems like, I mean, to me, I don't know, maybe I'm just jaded, but I feel like people out there probably knew this was going on. And it was just a matter of timing the release of the information in such a way that would cripple the church, even just in terms of what its concerns were. Like, instead of the war, it acted as like a big distraction. And now we have entire Catholic independent news outlets that have sort of been created. And I'm thinking of like Church Militant, and like they do a lot of good work in exposing, you know, the truth behind what's been going on. But it's like they're consumed with that instead of talking about the 16-year-long war. And I don't know, is that coincidence?
No. It's not coincidence. Ellen, do you mean to tell me that the sophisticated intelligence operations of the United States and Britain and France and Russia and Israel did not know the pedophilia that was going on in the Catholic Church for decades or centuries? Of course they did. Of course they did. They know everything. They know everything. And they knew the church knew it. And they knew that the modus operandi was just to move priests around, which, just parenthetically, as late as 1988, psychology books were still being published, secular psychology, saying that pedophilia was not that damaging. So, but they knew, there's no way governments didn't know of the enormity of the pedophilia that was going on in the Catholic Church.
Which I also think we are now discovering is also goes on in the government. That's all coming out.
Absolutely. It goes on New York school system. It goes on, you know, on and on. That pedophilia is a it's just a terrible universal problem, and has been for ages unto ages in the past.
And children of used for blackmail and things like that.
Absolutely. It's used every way. But remember, just if you've ever looked at the movie, which goes back to the Globe story, called Spotlight, it's pretty good. It's pretty accurate. And Spotlight was the Spotlight team of the Boston Globe that revealed this. What takes place is the New York Times buys the Boston Globe, 100% ownership. Then it changes the editor of the Boston Globe to a guy that comes in by the name of Marty Barons. And he orders the Spotlight team, soon after being there, to investigate this problem. The Spotlight team had never thought of doing this. And they actually, if the movie is right and the book is right, they actually kind of stepped back from wanting to do it, but he was the editor-in-chief, and he insisted that they do it. The guy appointed by the New York Times. And so they begin the process. It is really an expensive process. The key to getting the information that was necessary was that the Boston Globe, remembering that's a subsidiary of the New York Times, had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get at, through the court system and appeal system and so forth, to get at the secret archives of the Catholic Church, which were always thought to that point as simply being invulnerable. You can't go there with this. You cannot access the private conversation between a bishop and the priest on matters of conscience. Not confessional, that is. Well, anyway, after spending all that money, and then they come out with on, and then it's picked up, and last week, so this is 2019, and that's in 2002, January 2002, that Spotlight thing came out. So this is 17 years later, and the Boston Globe this past week or the week before that had a story about a priest in the Philippines who was engaged in pedophilia. Of all the stories in the world to put in a paper, what's that doing in there? Of all the things that are going on, what's that doing in there? No. I think the pedophilia thing to the Catholic bishops was by the secular world. Remember, the New York Times and the New York Times is just a subsidiary of the government, and the government subsidiary of the New York Times, whatever you want to call it. These are the elites. It was a warning shot over the bow of the Catholic Church. To be clever, it was a warning shot over the bow of the bark of Peter. And therefore, the warning shot was, this is only the tip of what we can do. Spend your time on this, blah, blah, blah. Don't you think they knew about bishops as well as priests? Of course they did. The CIA, NSA, Mossad, MM16, they knew it. They knew it for as long as it's been going on. It's just when you release it and for what purpose. And the purpose was, this was the shot over the bow of the bark of Peter. And it shut them all up. Because,
sure did.
Because they knew that governments and their intelligence services had a lot of other stuff beyond the sexual pedophilia if they wanted to really throw things out there that would discredit the church. I would say, for example, to use an example, the use of money, which is in all the churches, not just Catholic, but Catholic is the big one, huh? The use of money, I think there'd be scandals that would call for an end to, which may not be a bad thing, the nonprofit status of churches. But be that as it may, Ellen, back in 1936, on November 9, 1935, I probably got the date wrong. I know it's November 9th. I can't remember the exact year. Maybe 33. But anyway, I think it was 33. Anyway, Hitler has just become chancellor, which is basically sole ruler of Germany at that point. But he's still in the context of a balance of power thing with the legislature and so forth. And lo and behold, what happens? The Reichstag burns down. The whole Reichstag burns down. This massive building burns down overnight on November 9th. And of course, Hitler's right up there on the front saying, blame the communists, you know. Sounds like blame the Arabs. And then what happens after that? People want to give up freedom for security, and they demand that Hitler have dictatorial powers.
Father, do you think... Oh,
now just let me add one thing to that.
Sure.
9/11 had the same effect as the Reichstag burning. That is, it changed civil society, military society, consciousness, and put in place a totally different way of thinking about life. Now, that being the case, and we know it, everyone says, well, that was before 9/11, you can't, that being the case, Ellen, it seems to me that we always got to ask the question, who profits from an event? Who profits? Theoretically, we can look and say the cause was the communists, the cause was Osama bin Laden, the cause was. But look at who profits from a catastrophic event, and that's where you go to find out who caused the catastrophic event. And by profits, we mean profit politically, profit in terms of control of finance and government, profit in terms of raw profit. Look And that'll tell you a great deal. Now, the bishops of the United States, of course, are CEOs of, all of them are CEOs of multi-million-dollar corporations, church, diocese. Some of them, I suspect, they go into the billions. Of course they do. And they got to watch out for these things. They got to take care of these things. And they also know they have a lot of skeletons in the closet, as we all do. Everyone has a past. But so what they do is they simply tame the gospel down, tame it down to protect the institutional's wealth and political power and so forth. Can you imagine after every the bishops meet semi-annually, and the second of their meetings in the fall is at the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore, and it's surrounded with guards and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, every Tuesday night of that meeting, the United States military puts on a banquet for the bishops, and they accept. No, we're not talking about when something big happens, it's not an accident. And I guess the problem is that the problem that I have with it all is I could care less about the politics. But my concern is the salvation of souls. When you withhold critical information from your flock, information they need to know, because this is a moral problem of their time, you are doing something evil. You are doing something evil. And therefore, yes, I think there is a relationship. And by the way, one final little parenthesis here. There is no greater form of child abuse and child sexual abuse that occurs in war. Children are the fundamental and overwhelming victims of war universally. And that doesn't just mean death and suffering. It means sexual abuse and slavery and all kinds of other things.